Welcome to Bright Pink Soul, a true intuitive podcast where I get to chat with other bright pink souls. I'm SK, your psychic medium and friend. Today's episode is brought to you by Soul Sessions with SK, because you're not meant to figure it out alone. For a personal reading and Zesty Life Tarot, come find me at skcothren.com. That's skcothren.com. My guest today on Bright Pink Soul is Lyn Williams, who trained with Lyn Buchanan, one of the psychic spies hired by the U.S. government under the classified program called Project Stargate, which began in the 70s under different names and then shut down in 1995. Lyn is a speaker, an author, an instructor, and the founder of Intuitive Specialists, which is a school for remote viewing, and she calls it remote viewing training and services. Welcome, Lyn. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. I'm honored that you asked me to come, and I'm very happy to talk about all the different things you have in mind.
Awesome. Okay, well, are you in New Mexico right now?
I am in New Mexico right now as we speak. I'm up in the mountains, the Manzano Mountains, about 6,500 feet up. It's a gorgeous day outside, and we've had a lot of rain, so everything's green.
Nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Now, is
Beautiful
that
time.
near Taos? Are you near
No,
Taos?
it's not. I think we're about 4 hours from that.
Okay. So where are you in New Mexico? Like what in
Well,
relation?
if you were to stick a pin in the center of the map of New Mexico, because it's basically a square, and if you were to stick a pin in the center, that's right where we are.
Oh, perfect.
We're actually not in a town at all. We're out in the middle of nowhere. So if you just stick a pin in the middle, you'll find us. Probably stick it right into my house.
That's cool. Yeah. And you live in an Earth ship, right?
We lived in an Earthship for 6 years.
Okay.
And we have this property with 80 acres and 3 Earthships on them. And we were fascinated with the idea of living off grid and living in a very earth friendly home.
Right.
And so my son's like, "Mom, you're not going all doomsday prepper on me, are you?" But and we are not. We are not doomsday preppers, but we just loved the idea of living in a way that was more friendly to the earth. And a lot of our remote viewing things that we did were indicating that it was time for us to move from Amarillo, Texas, and to have our hearts learn to beat in time. The thing is that it was really it was just something we felt compelled to do. That we have 22 grandkids, and we just really wanted our grandkids to see an example of people living in harmony with the earth instead of, in a way that really uses a lot of diverse resources.
Right.
So we went ahead and moved out here, and then we lived for 6 years, this beautiful Earthship, which we still have. And then an adjoining piece of property came up. And around that time, my husband was experiencing some health issues and some mobility problems. And we thought, well, maybe we need to put in a house that's more aging friendly so we can age out. We ain't getting any younger. So we did that. And then right after that, we discovered this wonderful way of life that has helped us become much, much healthier. It's called becoming a nutritarian.
Okay.
And it's based on a book called Eat for Life by Dr. Joel Furman. And he is an MD that specializes in nutrition. And my husband was on a ton of meds because he had a heart attack and a stroke and a stage 2 prostate cancer. And he's on all of his meds, has normal blood pressure for the first time in his life. He's just doing great.
Well, congratulations. I think it sounds like a good choice for you guys.
Yeah, it has been a wonderful choice. And now we have Earthship Acres and Geezer Glen. we call our new place Geezer Glen.
I love it. That's perfect. I love alliteration anyway, so way to go.
It's,
So I would love to talk to you another time about, sustainable living and those kinds of things, because obviously you've lived that for many years. But on this particular podcast, let's focus on, kind of sharing what remote viewing is for people who don't really know, and, um, some of that, uh, psychic spy background, and whether or not what you do is considered psychic spying, or how does that line get drawn?
yeah, we don't do any spying. We leave all that to the military folks. We don't do spying.
So how do you define remote viewing?
Well, SK, remote viewing is a generic term, kind of like martial arts. So if I told you I had a 10th degree black belt in martial arts, your first question would be, oh, what kind of martial arts, right?
Okay.
So it's the same thing with remote viewing. Remote viewing is a catch-all term for anything psychic, really. I'm a crystal ball remote viewer. I mean, it's just like
Sure.
everything and anything. But we specialize in certain types of remote viewing. The main type and the first type that of course is our mainstay is controlled remote viewing, which is a technique that was developed for the U.S. military during the Cold War, when they discovered that the Russians were getting a lot of our military secrets. They didn't know how they were getting them. And they discovered that Russia had a psychic spying program. And so because of that, they said they went to these geniuses, these physicists at Stanford Research Institute, Palo Alto, California, and they said, hey, they've got this. We've got to have something comparable. We need you to research this and develop something. And so physicists Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ took that upon themselves, and they started researching. They brought in a man named Ingo Swann and another man named Pat Price. Pat was a retired detective from Burbank who had really outstanding psychic abilities that he had demonstrated. Ingo Swann he was an artist in New York City, but he was also a well-known psychic who had demonstrated, working with Pear Laboratories out of Princeton University, that he had pretty demonstrable skills as well. So these men became some of the first guys that they experimented with to research and prove whether or not psychic ability exists, whether or not telepathy, clairvoyance, and all these things are real. And they ended up with more solid proof that ESP, clairvoyance, telepathy, and everything are true functions of the human being than the FDA has, proving that aspirin is effective as a pain reliever.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's all documented. And of course, as we know, powers that be a lot of times want to try to make us think that none of this stuff works, it's not real, because it's actually kind of a threat. It makes people feel scared. They tend to
Yes.
fear that which we don't understand.
Sure.
So they did put out some disinformation saying, oh, it doesn't work, it never worked, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, I had is a producer for the Travel Channel, and years ago, before I knew her, she contacted me and she said, I'm doing a series of shows called Secrets of, I think it was called Secrets of, and she was interviewing Jimmy Carter for an episode called Secrets of the White House.
Okay.
And she said, what was the most outstanding thing in your presidency, or what was the most unusual thing in your presidency? And he said, oh, it was when the remote viewers found the downed Russian plane. So this Russian plane had gone down, and everybody knew it went down, and everybody, both the Russians and the U.S., were scrambling to try to find it. The U.S. wanted the tech off of it, and the
Sure.
Russians didn't want us to get the tech off it. So everybody was scrambling to try to get it. and the remote viewers actually gave them the GPS coordinates of where they would find it. And they did. They found it.
Wow.
So it's pretty, that was pretty outstanding. So that goes to show you, though, that this was something that was being used successfully in the U.S. military.
Sure. Is it still being used?
Aha, now there's the question. We have it from pretty good resources that, yes, it is still being used, although the military tends to always want to reinvent the wheel, especially, they put a new guy in charge and that guy scraps everything that's come before him and starts from
Yes.
scratch. Makes no sense whatsoever. But then, of course, that's why maybe calling it intelligence is an oxymoron. I don't know.
Yes.
But anyway, so yeah, from the sources we know, though, every country in the world, I used to run a refugee resettlement program,
Okay.
and there was a woman who worked for me as a translator, and she was from Suleimania, which is in northern Iraq, and so, I was kind of under the table about my remote viewing at that time because I was also a major fundraiser for this nonprofit. And so I was like, oh, if they find out that I'm a remote viewer, then they won't want to donate to the programs, So I was
Sure.
very in the closet about it. And this woman, so one day, I don't remember what caused it to happen, but I started telling her about remote viewing and that I was studying it, all this. She said, "Oh yes, Saddam has that too." And I was thinking, "Oh, Saddam has that too. Okay." You know, um, and then I became aware that just about every country on the planet has to have some sort of a psychic arm. Because if they didn't, they would be at a terrible disadvantage when other countries are getting information through psychic means.
Sure.
So if
It's
you wanted to explore a top secret facility of some sort, a weapons facility, for example, you can't just walk in the door and say, "Hey, I
right.
want to take some photos and see what you got here." So,
Yes.
so when you think about it, if you can explore it psychically and not be detected, I mean, gosh, what an advantage.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, it's such an ethical thing as a psychic as well, because um without even trying, sometimes you can go into places or go into people's minds or things that, without even really trying to, it just happens. And I think
Yes, and
it's
that's why controlled remote viewing is such an advantage because the emphasis is on the part of control, where you control yourself, and then you can kind of aim your abilities so that instead of it being random and you just accidentally, lock into someone else's thoughts, or you accidentally bump into a place that you didn't mean to go, it's more control, and you can
right.
actually control where you're going, and what you're doing, and who you're doing it with.
I love that. And can you explain the difference and the difference between remote viewing and controlled remote viewing?
Yes. So again, remote viewing is a generic term that means any kind of psychic functioning, whether it's palm reading, tarot reading, psychometry, no matter what. Even mediumship. Sometimes some people refer to it as remote viewing.
Okay.
So it's become a catch-all phrase. Whereas controlled remote viewing is a set of written protocols following a strict structure, a written structure. The structure is designed to give your conscious mind something to do so it won't have quite the opportunity to interfere as much, because your conscious mind isn't psychic at all. Even for the greatest psychics among us, the part of that person that is psychic is not the conscious mind; it is the subconscious mind, which is plugged in to consciousness. And I like to think of consciousness as being the hub of a wheel, and all these different tools, so controlled remote viewing, tarot reading, mediumship, all of those are spokes coming off that wheel, that hub of consciousness
Okay.
on the wheel. And so, because no matter what technique we're using, we're all tapping into consciousness.
Yes.
So consciousness is definitely the new frontier. I think it's the thing we know the least about. We know about the moon, we know about the oceans, we know about the cosmos, but what do we know about consciousness? I think that we're only beginning to scratch the surface on what consciousness truly is. And for me, I think consciousness and love are wrapped up together, and
Interesting.
that's truly what God is. And for
Huh.
me, that's God.
Yeah.
That's what God is. What we refer to as consciousness is probably God. But anyway, that's just my opinion. So take it with a grain of salt. But anyway, so it really seems like that's the key that we're all trying to find is how can we access information that's hidden from us?
Yes.
And you mentioned earlier, you mentioned something about psychic spies, and now that it's been declassified, it got declassified in 1995, and I met Lyn Buchanan in 1996.
Okay.
And so and I was actually the very first person the first non-military person to be certified as an instructor in controlled remote viewing.
Okay.
And so this technique is designed to separate true psychic perceptions from mere imagination.
Okay.
And of course, imagination plays a huge role. Like if I had an envelope with a photograph inside the envelope, and I said, SK, could you just describe what's inside this envelope? And you said, well, Lori, I feel like it's something red, smooth, and shiny. I bet it's an apple. And then we open it, and it's a fire engine. And then the part of your brain that described it as red, smooth, and shiny was accurate. The part of your brain that said, I bet it's an apple, is a part of our brains that was given to us by God to keep us alive as a species. Because if Lug and Og are walking through the primeval forest and they hear a twig snap behind them, and one of them is taking off saying saber-toothed tiger, that's our ancestor, because the guy who turned around to see what caused the snap was the guy who got eaten.
Okay.
So
Right.
and so so that's the key right
The
there.
connection.
Is that we do have to have that identifying part of our brain to help us, identify dangers, right?
Sure.
But that psychic part of our brain is the part of our brain, the right brain, that really is able to describe things fully. Yes, it's red, it's smooth, it's shiny. And if you thought it was an apple and you tried to mentally take a bite of it, you quickly find out that it wasn't an apple. So, so that
how
part
do
of the
you
brain.
do you
Pardon me?
sorry, so basically, how do you define the difference between the psychic perception and tapping into consciousness and imagination?
Well, that's the thing, is that the parts, it's actually the whole study of CRV is based on brain science and the functions of the left brain, functions of the right brain, and the interaction between conscious and subconscious minds. And because of that, because it's based on brain science, we know where these different thoughts are coming from as we're sitting there with our paper and our pen and just letting thoughts flow from our mind onto the paper.
Okay.
And one of the key things to controlled remote viewing is the knowledge of the body being the link between the conscious and subconscious minds.
Okay.
Because your average person it doesn't have a real link to the subconscious. They think that like for example, if I'm Lori, I think that the part of me that is Lori is my personality, my ego, whatever. It's really, that part of me is really like 0.0001% of who I really am. We all know that we have a higher self and that we're tied into the great consciousness that's there, that has all the knowledge that ever was, is, or will be. So because we have this ability to tap into that, like the big cosmic database in the sky, then it's like, okay, well, all right, I can tap into it, but how do I communicate with my subconscious mind, which doesn't speak English? It doesn't speak in language at all.
Right.
It conveys things to us through our bodies. That's why we say things like, oh, that person's such a pain in the neck.
Yes.
Right? Because we communicate with the subconscious via our bodies, and the subconscious communicates with us via our bodies. And an example of that is when you're driving a route that you drive all the time, like let's say to work and home, to work and home, to work and home. And one day you pull in into your driveway and you go, I don't even remember driving the last few blocks, because you're so used to driving it that you were busy thinking about what you were going to cook for dinner, and your conscious mind checked out thinking about that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And your subconscious took over the body and got you safely home.
Yes, that's a great example.
And so our bodies are the link between the conscious and subconscious mind. So therefore, controlled remote viewing is very much a physical martial art, in that we really engage the body. You're sitting at a table with paper and pen, you're writing on the piece of paper, you're letting your thoughts flow, but everything goes on the paper in a certain pattern, in a way that gives your conscious mind something busy to keep it busy. Like, oh, okay, well, I need to put this over here, I need to put that over there. And so that's kind of the idea behind controlled remote viewing, is that it is based on a structure, on a written
Okay.
structure.
And it does involve drawing as well, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, your voice cut out there. Could you repeat that?
It does involve drawing, right?
There is some sketching. Yes, there is some sketching. So phase one is the first phase of the remote viewing process. There's essentially six major phases. There's some other little small phases. We have a phase seven, but it's more like a little tool. So if you think of the six major phases of controlled remote viewing, the first phase is a phase where we kind of find out the overall concepts that are involved in anything that we're being asked to look at. And we want to keep the remote viewer blind to whatever it is they're looking at. And the reason we keep them blind to it is because of our own stereotypes and prejudices. So if I said, SK, the target is a criminal, describe the criminal, and you said, oh, the criminal is a tall, dark male of ethnic origins with wheat-colored skin and pockmarks, and he's drug addicted and violent, and and all these things. And you gave me a description like that, and it turned out that the criminal we're looking for is the little old lady who's been embezzling from the company for 50 years.
Yes. I
So
see.
because
Yeah.
the word criminal is so loaded
Yes.
with stereotypes, right? And so that's why we want to keep the viewer as neutral as possible without polluting the viewer with a bunch of the information that will just lead the viewer astray.
So do you just give them a number then, or what is the
Yes,
target?
yes, you can give the viewer a number or a name. Like, let's say that I was going to I wanted to give information to a woman named Catherine. I could literally write the word Catherine and just start with that. It doesn't, that part really is kind of insignificant, doesn't matter so much.
Okay.
It's more about the process that takes place. You get your pen moving, and then your pen does squiggle, which we call an ideogram. And we developed these ideograms initially to determine what are some of the overall concepts that we can start with, really broad brushstrokes. For example, like the idea of land. And we know there's many types of land, right? There's marshy land and hilly land and sandy land and flat lands and, every kind of land
Sure.
imaginable. There's or we think about the concept of water. Well, water could be ice or snow or steam. It could be the ocean or a puddle. It could be the wine in someone's glass. So the idea of water is kind of a broad brushstroke of anything that involves liquid or water, or even solids like ice.
So that would be like it would be the symbol of water, like a line, a squiggly line.
Yes. So initially, what we have our students do is they'll sit down and we'll give them 7 broad brushstroke words like land, water, man-made, biological, motion energy, space, air, natural. We give them these broad ideas, and the understanding that these are gestalts or overall cover a pretty broad range of items. Like I said, water could be snow, ice, clouds, steam, vapor, so many things water encompasses. So people create these these very, very simplistic little squiggles or symbols for each one of those things.
Right.
And those symbols might change as they develop, as they grow. My first symbol for biological was a very complicated, a very complicated stick figure, which cannot be an ideogram because it's too complex. Because we want the ideogram to be something that happens very spontaneously.
Okay.
And that just kind of bursts out of your pen without a lot of control on your part.
Sure.
And then we analyze that. Then you want to, and we have a process for a little bit of analysis. Now, again, the analysis part comes from the left brain, and again, is giving giving the conscious mind something to do to keep it out of the way.
Okay.
And so we do that a lot, because when you think about it, even from your experience as a psychic medium, how many times in your career have you second guessed yourself and almost been afraid to say what you want to say because you're like, well, what if that's,
Yeah, oh
right?
yeah,
So that
absolutely. I mean, I I give an example of I mean, I realize that might be a rhetorical question, but it is so interesting because even though I want to get my mind out of the way so that I can, like you said, get your conscious mind out of the way so you can just share this information. Sometimes something just keeps coming back and coming back and coming back, and you just have to say it. And then when you say it or you share this message that's coming through, it's often exactly what that person needed. Even though
exactly.
your mind is telling you, oh, that's not right, or that's not a good message, or that's going to hurt this person in some way. It's the thing they need to hear.
Exactly. I remember talking with Lyn Williams, who's a well-known psychic medium, and she was joking about how she was doing a reading for this woman, and the word that kept coming to her was a vulgar word that that the acronym for would be "See you next Tuesday."
Uh,
And
yes,
and she was like, she's thinking, I can't say that to this woman, this very proper
right.
British woman. She's like, I can't say it, I can't say it. So she doesn't say it. She's trying every which way to share stuff. And the woman's like, no, the woman's completely unimpressed. Finally, she goes, well, does the word, blank mean anything to you? And the woman, oh, it's my Charlie,
Yes, exactly.
so,
Yes.
so it can be the most random thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yes, we want to, because I was asking you about second guessing yourself,
Yes.
that's the job of the conscious mind. And so even, as like my new students coming in and they'll start taking remote viewing and they'll start learning the structure, and then they'll have to battle themselves because they'll have a word pop up and they'll think, well, I can't write that down. That's probably not right. And those are the thoughts coming from the conscious mind. So initially, there's kind of a sibling rivalry between conscious and subconscious. We're using ideograms to open that door between the conscious and subconscious mind. It's a physical language of symbols that just kind of come out as scribbles, and then we kind of pick them apart. It's almost like reading tea leaves or something, except you're reading the squiggle.
Yes.
And and then and then you come up with the overall ideas. Well, I think at this site, whatever this target is that you've given me, I think there's some elements of water and some elements of land and some man-made objects, maybe some biological. Biological can mean anything that is living or has had life.
Okay.
And so, so I think there's some elements of that. There's some motion energy happening there. I think space air is playing a role in this as well. And so then what you do is then you go into phase two, which is where we move to each thing. I'm going to move to this water element. I'm going to move to the water element and I'm going to examine it. And so then you move to the water and you start describing the water. And maybe you discover, oh, it's cold and icy. Instead of it being nice and warm and frothy, you're like, oh, wait, this water isn't what I thought it was going to be. It's actually pretty icy and cold.
So are they
And now
experiencing that in their body then, like the feeling sensation?
No, this is so different from out of body work because with out of body work, you're kind of flying around in your subconscious mind.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, you're staying very solidly in your body. You're writing on a piece of paper. You're talking out loud. You're saying everything out loud because we want to engage the body as much as possible
Okay.
in the process. And we also want to keep the conscious mind busy. And so it's very different from out of body in that way. And actually, on my website at intuitivespecialist.com, which is, specialist is plural with an S at the end. So it's intuitivespecialist.com. There's a blog section, and I've been writing blogs for 15 years. And so there's a gazillion blogs. And a lot of the blogs are actually little mini classes that teach you all about, all kinds of things with remote viewing. And so, yeah, that's as we go into this process, you start learning that all of a sudden I just sort of spaced out and forgot where we were
You were
going with
you were
that very
talking
badly.
about the protocols and how you don't feel it in your body because you're not flying around.
Oh, right. So the difference, so there's a blog. I actually have a blog on what's the difference between astral projection and controlled remote viewing.
Okay.
And there's a blog there that explains all the differences. And one of the differences is that you're very much staying in your body. Your eyes are open. Your hand is writing. Your mouth is talking. Your ears are listening. So you're really engaging yourself as much as you can in the process. Again, to keep the conscious mind busy, give it a job to do, and that the subconscious mind finally have a voice. And the subconscious will communicate in your session via sensations. So, you can actually taste things, you can smell things,
Okay.
you can hear things. But it's kind of like if I were to ask you right now, SK, could you tell me what a lemon tastes like? And in your mind, you're kind of remembering what a lemon tastes like. And so you're not actually out of your body tasting a lemon. You are experiencing it through your memory.
Okay.
Of what a lemon tastes like. So you're at the site and suddenly you smell strawberries or something. And you go, oh, it's not. I'm smelling strawberries. And you write that down. And, then next thing you know, you're like, oh, I'm seeing bright flashes of light, or I'm hearing explosive sounds, or, whatever. And so you're not actually at the site. There's no part of you that has left your body, but you're experiencing things through memory perceptions that come up. And they just are very fleeting and very quick. And you just write everything down. Our main rule is write everything down. And of course, the tendency is to want to second guess, oh, but what if I'm wrong? So one of the things I tell my students all the time is give yourself permission to make a mistake and give yourself permission to make stuff up. Because everybody expects there to be like some crazy psychic sensation. Like I'm going to have this amazing revelation, like a neon sign that appears in the sky.
Yes.
And that's not the way psychic impressions work at all. They're so subtle and they come through very quickly and quietly, almost like the aperture of a camera, just opening and closing quickly.
Yes.
And you have to grasp it and write it down as quick as you can. And you don't question it. You don't have to question it. You just write it all down. And then after you see the feedback, after you see what it was you were remote viewing, then you can actually score it and say, okay, I said this man-made thing was red. Is it red? Yes or no? And you can actually score it. And we have a database, which also kind of differentiates controlled remote viewing from other psychic processes because we actually database our results.
Okay.
So that we can learn our own strengths and weaknesses. You can find out that Joe has a 95% accuracy rate in colors, and Tom is excellent. He's got a really great success rate describing man-made objects, and Sue is amazing at describing people and understanding their motives and their plans, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah, that was one of my questions is, how do you know it's accurate?
Yes, and so what we do, I kind of got to talk to you about one of my, I don't know if it's a pet peeve, but it is something that happens on a regular basis that I think we should mention. And that is that there are people out there who will claim that they are going to teach you an authentic way of remote viewing. And again, remote viewing being a catch-all, right? You can go, oh, wow, great. I've been wanting to learn remote viewing. And then they go in, and we've actually seen manuals from some of these schools where the first thing that you're asked to do is sit down and remote view the grays on the planet Zircon in the galaxy of nebulae. and so they go, oh my God, I had the most amazing experience viewing those grays on that planet Zircon. It was just amazing. They communicated with me and they told me blah, 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 blah. And they can, they have this, what they consider to be a fabulous experience. But the problem is they don't have a track record. So as far as anyone is concerned, it could just be their imagination. It could just be they're making stories up and they believe it. They've fallen into self-delusion and they believe everything they got. So one thing about going to a school that teaches true controlled remote viewing is that you cut your teeth on practice targets that have provable feedback that can then be scored and databased.
Okay.
And so you can build a track record so we can literally find out how good is SK at describing man-made objects? How good is SK at describing events accurately?
Okay.
How good is SK at describing people accurately? How good is she at describing locations accurately and activities accurately? Man-made objects, etc.
So do you have so you can specialize almost?
Exactly. And then
Okay.
also if we have a really serious thing come up, like the police are like, hey, we have a child who just got kidnapped, we need your help. Then let's say they need, first of all, they need somebody who can describe the condition of the child right now. And we know that SK is the best person to call on for that because she's got an amazing track record with describing people.
Okay.
Then we're gonna be tasking you towards your strengths rather than your weaknesses.
I
Does that make
believe
sense?
in that. I truly believe we all have strengths, and if we build from our strengths, it's so much of an easier life than always focusing on our weaknesses. So that's a really cool way to go about it. Speaking
Yes, for sure.
of missing children or missing people, I know you've worked on some missing persons cases.
Many, many.
Yeah. So how do you? I'm really curious about that. How do you go about that?
Well, one thing is we always start out knowing that we are not going to find a missing person. We are simply there to provide supplemental information that hopefully can assist those who are doing their job in finding the missing person.
Okay.
Um, and so, and also in my school, of course, we're focused on training. That's our main focus. So we get requests almost daily for missing people cases. A lot of those requests come from people who are just like, hey, it was on, it was in our news today that some kid got kidnapped from my town. Can you find her? Well, we don't initiate anything without being asked by the investigative officer
Okay.
because if because it's a waste of time. We don't know who's investigating the case. We don't have any connection to the case, and neither does the person who's asking us.
Sure.
They're just like trying to be good citizens and say, "Hey, this kid disappeared from my town today. You guys should find her." Um, as much as it breaks our hearts to see how many people go missing constantly, and especially if you get like requests like my brother just went missing or my child just went missing. You really want to help, but the problem is that we can actually do more harm than good if we start working with a family, for example, and we're working without the police knowing that we're involved, and the family takes our information and goes off and tries to find their loved one. They could literally walk into the lion's den. They
Right.
could, or let's say that the person has been killed and is at the bottom of a very dangerous ravine, and the family goes trying to find them, and they end up falling to their own deaths or something.
Right.
It's just not a good idea. And that was one of the very first things I learned when studying with Lyn was we don't ever get involved in missing person cases unless we are directly hired or asked to help by the investigating team.
Okay.
And if you give the information to the family and they take it to the police and the police say, just throw it in the garbage usually. They don't want to work with psychics, and they just throw it in the garbage.
Right.
So
Yes.
so it's got to be at the auspices of the investigating officers. And so for 2 years, I worked with a police detective and a team in helping to find missing people and providing information. And after a while, I got out of it just because it became very draining, as a lot of the missing people that they were asking me to look for were criminals that were on the lam.
Okay.
And they are very dark people, some of them. So it
Yes.
got to where it was like that was my whole diet of remote viewing for a couple of years, and it became
Right.
very draining. And it's you have to take care of yourself, as a psychic
Yes.
medium. Self-care is so important, and if you just have a pure diet of something that's very dark and negative, over time that's going to eat at you. It's going to
Absolutely.
definitely have an effect on you. So one of the things I learned many years ago was keep it varied. You want to keep it varied, and you want to do a variety of different types of remote viewing things. And right now in my school, one of the things we're really focused on is helping the viewers and students to learn how to do really practical type of remote viewing that answers questions in their own lives and helps them
Yes. I was
make
curious about
great
that.
choices.
Yeah.
Yes, it
How
really helps.
people are using it in their lives and how remote viewing can help you personally.
Exactly. Like help you with making better career choices, help you with making better relationship choices, help you in making better financial choices.
So
Those
how do you do that?
We really work in our school with our students to learn how to use remote viewing in the most practical of ways, and not just once in a while either, to use it daily throughout the day. And we teach them ways to get information very quickly, as in addition, ways to sit down and get a lot of detailed information. I'll give you an example. For example, once I was needing to know whether my daughter was dating a drug dealer. And I didn't want just a yes or no. That you don't
Yes.
use controlled remote viewing for yes or no questions. You can use a pendulum for that, but
Yeah.
but but instead, it would be like the target is the man that my daughter is dating. We have a thing called tasking and a thing called front-loading. So tasking is the full question with all the pollution that we do not want the remote viewer to see because it might have the word criminal in it, for example, right?
Okay, sure.
So we don't want to pollute the remote viewer. So we will have the tasking, and the important thing is that the person with the question, who we refer to as the tasker, that person has to have it very clear in their minds what is it they want to know. Because if they don't have it clear in their heads, then you're going to end up with a muddied answer, right?
So getting
And
clear on your
so,
question is really important.
yes, the tasking is really of primary importance. And what I've learned over the years is a lot of people do not know what they want to know. I mean, they're just not
Yes.
sure. And
Yes.
so they, pardon me? Pardon me?
Yes, I agree. That's one of the things that I find so often in a reading, people don't have a clear question. And once we start talking about the energy around them at this moment, then the questions start to solidify.
Yes. And so I'll give you an example. I actually do classes on this, on how to ask the right question, how to formulate taskings. And I'll give you an example. I had a guy who called me and he said, okay, I'm trying to decide if I should stay in the job I'm at, whether I should go across town and join up with a competitive company, or whether I should just start my own business. Now, what was really interesting was that this was in 2019.
Okay.
And so, I just, as soon as he asked it, I had a big burst of clear cognizance where
Sure.
I was like, I instantly knew that something was coming that was going to make this whole question completely null and void. And the pandemic was the thing that made it null and void because his industry sunk in the pandemic and he ended up driving for Uber. So,
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah, so I knew I knew that immediately. I did not share that with him though, because I believe that you should never share unsolicited advice. And his whole purpose in asking me the question was so he could learn how to formulate tasks. He was one of my students, right?
Sure.
So initially, so what I said to him first was, okay, so you're asking yourself whether you should leave the job you're at or stay, whether you should go across town, join a competitor, or whether you should start your own company in that same field. I said, so the first question I have for you is, why are you even asking this question? What
Yes.
what is your motive? Do
That
you
makes
feel
sense.
like you're not making enough money? Do you feel like you're not happy? So are you seeking happiness? Are you seeking greater affluence? What are you truly seeking? What's the question behind the question? That's
Yes.
what we need to know. And so he said, well, I guess I want to make more money. So then I'm like, okay, because that's going to help us with the tasking question, which has to have timing parameters attached to it. Like, okay, so the target is the job in which I will make the most money between now and a year from now, let's say. So now we've got a time frame attached to it, and we've got the why behind the question. Well, where I need the target is the description of the job that I can get that will provide me with the most money between now and a year from now.
Okay.
And so then the viewer is just told something like they're told nothing and just given a number, or they're told maybe something very generic like the target is a situation, describe the situation. And so then they can just write down however they see the situation, whatever they see. And then hopefully the person who's asking the question knows enough about their field and knows enough about things that answer will make sense to them.
Okay.
And so we had, for example, years ago during the first Iraqi war, we had a situation in which a team of American soldiers were ambushed and they vanished. And so the investigative officer contacted Lyn Buchanan and said, hey, we've got this situation. Can remote viewers view where the ambush guys are? And so he put together a team of viewers, and the only information they're given was the target is a location. Describe the target. Because all the viewers needed to do was describe the location where these ambush guys were taken. And hopefully the team would know, the team that was there in Iraq. So you have all these viewers who've never been to Iraq, have no idea what the target is, and all they're told is the target is the location. They start describing this location, and they're not naming anything. It's one of our main mantras is describe, don't identify.
Okay.
Because you're just a viewer. You've never been to Iraq. You may not know what it is you're looking at. Just describe it. Because if you describe it, you're using your right brain. If you name it, you're using your left brain, which is not psychic at all. That's the identifying part of your brain.
Excellent. I love that.
And so then they start describing it. Lyn collected all the information, sent it to the investigative officer, who showed everything, all the sketches, and read everything to his team of soldiers that he had there. And they all knew the area really well, and they all jumped up and said, we know just where that is. And they went there, and unfortunately, the ambush soldiers had all been killed.
Oh, no.
But they arrested 11 ambushers.
Wow.
And so they caught the ambushers. They were too late to save the soldiers, but at least they caught the ambushers. So the moral of that story, though, is the viewers didn't need to know what the target was. They didn't need to know anything about the location. All they needed to do was describe what they perceived. And the people who did know the area, it was their responsibility to recognize what the viewers were describing.
Excellent. So you mentioned earlier about energy, talking about how your energy was drained when you were working with darker subjects. So when you're working, especially as an empath who feels everything and is very sensitive, how would you recommend going about remote viewing so that you don't tax your energy and drain it?
The important thing is to detox afterwards.
Okay. And how do you do that?
And so detoxing is a wonderful tool to have. And what I usually recommend to my students is that one of the biggest reasons we get drained is because we have attached ourselves too strongly to someone or something at the target.
Okay.
And so we've taken that on, and I'll give you an example. When many years ago, Lyn Buchanan's main job was to describe the plans and intents of world leaders. And so he had been working all week on this one unknown world leader. He didn't know who he was describing. But he'd been working on describing this person. And then he was driving home for the weekend. He had a long commute home. And he's driving along and he's thinking, okay, this weekend I'm going to mow the lawn. I'm going to trim the hedges. I'm going to clean out my sock drawer. I'm going to kill my wife. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, and he pulls over. And he's like freaked out. He loves his wife dearly. Jumps out. He's walking around his car kind of freaking out, thinking, why did that thought come to me? And that weekend, Idi Amin's wife mysteriously died. And she was murdered, and so it's like just as a coincidence. I'm not saying it was Idi Amin. I'm just telling you that coincidentally, Idi Amin's wife happened to be murdered that year.
Yes.
But anyway, so
That's intense.
so that really impressed on Lyn the need for detoxing from every session. So what do we do to detox? Well, the important thing is that you separate yourself and your own identity from the target site and from anybody at the target. So, because this could even happen if you were asked by somebody to find their missing dog, and the dog is alone and frightened and hungry and starving or whatever, and you tap into that, and then suddenly you're depressed and you're, unusually hungry and tired, and you know what I mean, and you don't know why, and it's because you tapped into the dog and you haven't let it go. So, one of the things that I found most effective for me is I have to immerse myself in my own reality and do things that give me joy and that I consider really my things. So that could be interacting with one of my grandkids. That could be watching my favorite comedian. That could be playing music and singing. That could be dancing to my favorite rock and roll. That could be getting a full body massage. That could be making love to my husband.
Sure.
That, it could be anything that pushes that reset button in your system and brings you back fully into your own reality. We even have an area where it's kind of a meditation room in the Earthship, and we have a lot of instruments in there, musical instruments, and we kind of consider that like a sound detox room.
Oh, sure.
Where we can play chimes, we have a lot of stringed instruments, we have flutes, we have drums, and
Nice.
so you just go in there and just immerse yourself in sound
Oh, I love
and
that.
pull it. Yeah, and in that way you're pulling away from the target. Lyn
Okay.
Buchanan's favorite way of detoxing is he likes to look at the last thing that he got in his session and then separate himself from that last thing. And then go to the next to the last thing and separate himself from that. And go to the next to the last thing and separate himself from that. And it's a rather tedious and involved way of detoxing. He feels like it's the only way to detox. I have found, and several of my fellow remote viewers who all happen to be females, we've all found that Lyn's way actually makes it worse for us because we find ourselves getting pulled back into the target just by looking at our session again.
Okay.
So we found that Lyn's method doesn't work as well for us, but it does work great for Lyn and other viewers that he's taught it to. So, and I'm learning that there are different types of minds, and certain types of minds do better with certain things than others. Like people who tend to be more left-brained might do better with Lyn's way. People who are more right-brained might do better with my way, because again, the empath thing comes into play.
Sure.
And if you're extremely empathic and sensitive, then Lyn's way doesn't seem to work as well as my way.
I could already feel that. I could feel that would draw me right back in. I would be reattached if I were using Lyn's way.
Yeah, I discovered this. I had been using Lyn's way on just practice targets for a long time, and it worked fine until I was working on a real case of a missing child. And this child had been shot by a friend with a gun that he found by accident. It was a kids playing with guns situation. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew that we had a missing child. And so I was linked into this missing kid, and they were walking through the forest, and I suddenly had this searing knife-like hot pain that shot from the back of my skull to the front of my skull.
Oh, wow.
And it was so real and so strong that I leapt out of my chair, and I went, "Oh my God, I just got shot in the head." And so then, I felt a great need to stop right then and detox immediately. And that's when I tried using Lyn's method, and it made it worse and worse. And I finally realized I can't do this. I've got to figure something else out.
Okay.
And so that's what I
That
did.
makes sense.
Now, my husband is a retired forensic scientist. And so like Lyn, he's got more of a scientific background. And that Lyn's method of detoxing works great for him. It just works great. So some things work better for some people and other things work better for other people.
So how do you use, just in your daily life, how do you use your psychic intuition?
I use it all the time, every day. Really, I mean, because I think I'm 68 years old. I don't know how old you are.
I'm 54.
54. When people say, "I'd rather not tell you my age," and I say, "Okay, how much do you weigh?"
Exactly. I don't have any problem. I think age is just a number, so it doesn't bother me at all.
Well, it doesn't bother me either. I mean, because we're only here so temporarily, and we've got these bodies that we are borrowing, and so what difference does it make how old we are? But anyway, so as a person who I had a near-death experience as a young child, and I grew up just, my earliest memories are of beings coming and taking me out of my body and taking me to classrooms and seeing ghosts and hearing the other side of a conversation when my mom would be on the phone and I could hear what the other person was saying in my head.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
We will definitely have to come back and talk more about those things. That's fascinating. Yeah.
Yes. And so, when you grow up with these things, just being a part of who you are. You think everybody experiences reality that way. And,
Yes.
and this is just normal, right? I'm not a freak. This is normal. And so, and so because of that, I grew up thinking this was the way everybody was and that life was just like that. And it's just been a journey my whole life. And then I ended up meeting these Jesus people when I just turned 14. I was like 14 and 3 weeks old. And I met these Jesus people, hippies in this park,
Mm-hmm.
right after my family had moved to Knoxville, Tennessee. And I ended up getting, kind of joining this group. My parents let me visit them for several years, and I was evangelizing in my high school and saving souls for Jesus. And then I ended up going full time into this group, and I spent 20 years from that day that I met them when I was 14 until I was 34. And and then of course and they actually were into some pretty woo-woo supernatural stuff, but it was all like tied to the voice of the Lord or,
Okay.
prophetic dreams. As long as you tied it to something with God, you were okay. But
Okay.
if you used the word psychic, then that was of the devil,
Uh-huh.
and you
That
might
makes
get demon
sense.
possessed.
Yes.
And so I was struggling with my
Recognize.
own abilities because they were constantly coming into play, and I was constantly seeing ghosts and things. But I was struggling with it because I didn't want to cross the line over into the devil's territory.
Right.
And so I was always crawling around like the ice underneath me was going to break. And it was after I got out of that group when I decided I wanted to reconcile these experiences I'd had my whole life with this very Christian belief system that I still had coming out of the group. And it was a very binary belief system, and it's really become so much bigger.
Yes.
And God has gotten much bigger because now instead of just heaven and hell and God and the devil, Jesus and Jesus and the bad guys, instead of it having this binary thing of opposites, now my belief system is so much broader, and I realize there's multiple dimensions,
Yes.
multiple universes, parallel universes. There's so many things that help us in our reality, and reality is not at all what I thought it was. So my whole belief system has changed a lot, but I still find those days of the way I was living, as a missionary, they are wonderful days. I mean, sure, there were some negative things and some trauma
Sure.
and stuff, but there was also a lot of miraculous thinking that led to one miracle and after another and manifestations and things. So I still have a great deal of respect for that time of my life and feel that I learned some great survival skills.
I bet.
Um,
So how do
and it
you
was,
go ahead?
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
What tips would you give for people in their lives just that they could use today to strengthen their intuition and trust themselves more?
Well, the first thing I would say, the first rule of trusting yourself is trust yourself. Because, because,
Yes. It's simple,
because
but
it's,
it's
it's so,
true.
yeah, it's so hard to, it's just hard because of our society. We're constantly put down as we're growing up. Many of us experience a lot of criticism. High expectations and criticism from parents, from teachers. Maybe even
Yes.
bullying children, other kids. It can be really hard. So it's natural for us to have this inner critic that's constantly putting us down or making us, question ourselves. And so I find that it's important to tune in to that wee small voice inside of you that's guiding you. And sometimes just to stop for a second, close your eyes and just listen and see what kind of guidance you're getting. Ask a question, should I turn left or right at this corner? Should I take Adams to get to my destination or should I take Washington Street?
Mm-hmm.
And just ask and just see which way do you feel it in your body? Is your body leaning towards the left or towards the right, or do you feel a sensation in your solar plexus that's kind of going one way or another?
Well said.
Really pay attention to your body because your body is going to give you indicators. Um, just Like
Yeah.
if you think about it, even if setting aside your ability as a psychic medium for a second, if you just think about the times when you have felt something in your body, like you were going to do something and you kind of got a warning sensation somewhere in your body. Where was it?
Yeah, a lot of times I get it in my ears. I'll get a signal in my ears, which is kind of strange maybe, but sometimes I've
That's really cool.
signals in my
That's
ears, like on my right side or my left side. Um, so I'll get them in my ears. Sometimes I get them in my back, like, somebody else's energy is telling me something.
oh,
I know a lot of people get gut, gut,
uh-huh.
instincts, but I have never, only in really extreme situations do I get a gut instinct. Sometimes I'll get it right in my heart chakra.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It just depends. I've really I've had to get very aware of my body because, and that's something I'm curious about because I think for years I just was astral traveling all the time.
Uh-huh.
And I really didn't live in my body. I didn't know that,
Uh-huh.
until I got really sick and experienced 2 near-death experiences and slowly but surely have come back in the last 11 years. And I'm a completely different person. So I live in my body much more now. So I get weird sensations all the time in different places in my body.
Uh-huh.
But I think looking back before I was aware, I would get them in the center of my back, like between my shoulder blades.
Oh,
That's probably my most common sensation.
that's really fascinating to me. Yeah, I think that different people like for someone who's listening who perhaps doesn't feel like they're naturally psychic. I talk to people who say I do not have a psychic bone in my body. I'm about as psychic as a bag of rocks. Those kinds of comments, and then they take remote viewing and they turn out to be amazing remote viewers.
Exactly, because everybody's psychic. They just don't realize it.
Everybody is psychic. And CRB is a great way. I was, when I had so much fear from being in the missionary group that I was going to displease God or something, uh, remote viewing has freed me from so much fear and so much anxiety. Because it's just freed me up that this is all just part of who we are as humans. We
Yes.
are psychic, and we do have these abilities, and it's not of the devil. It's no more evil than your eyesight or your ears.
Yeah.
And I say, well, what if you use your eyes to look at porn? Does that make your eyesight evil? Well,
Good
no.
question.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, no, I mean, we all have these abilities, and it's really just a matter of trusting,
Yeah.
trusting what comes to you and paying attention to your body and how your particular body
Yeah.
warns you of things. And so for the person who feels like I've never had a psychic experience, I'm not psychic at all, just think about times when you have felt fear for anything. Maybe you were in your house alone and you heard a sound and you thought somebody was in the house. Those kinds of moments. Where does the fear originate? And most people can tell you, oh, it starts in my stomach, or it starts in my solar plexus, or it starts in my chest.
Or
That's your
those
body.
hairs on the back of your neck.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes your throat constricts and your mouth goes dry.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, if you think about a time when you were going to have a real confrontation with somebody, an unpleasant conversation, I mean, your mouth just goes dry as cracker dust a mile from a glass of water. And you feel like you can't swallow, you can't talk because your tongue's stuck to the roof of your mouth. Those kinds of situations that we all experience. And so anyway, I just want to say that's very normal. You are psychic, whether you think you are or not, for any of you who are listening. And just know that, you can learn this. Anybody can learn it. I always have students in every class I teach say, can anybody learn this? And I say, yes, anyone can learn it. And I hear everybody thinking, I'll be the first one who can't.
Uh-huh.
Watch, I'll be Lori's first student who can't do it.
What do you think
And
most people's fear is? Is it about the drawing? Is it about the psychic ability? What do you think most?
everybody's afraid to be wrong.
Okay.
It's like you had to bring home straight A's or you'd get in trouble.
Right.
And when you made a mistake, you got punished for it. So people are conditioned from birth not
Yes.
to make a mistake, and so they're afraid to be wrong, and so therefore they are afraid to write down what's coming into their minds because it might be wrong.
So
And
how
then
do
and
you
then
deal with
also the
that?
logical thought of what am I trying to do? I'm trying to describe a picture in an envelope I can't even see, or
It's so cool. I just think it's so cool.
yeah. So it's just and also I wanted to go back to touch on that one thing we talked about where if you have a track record, if you've done 100 sessions and you have them in the database and they show that you have a certain percentage of accuracy in certain areas, then if you are asked to view the grays on the planet Zircon in the galaxy of nebulae, and you describe your experience, then truly we have a bit of a track record to go to base it on. So if you
Right.
say, do you know that planet Zircon is actually purple, and you have a 95% accuracy rate in colors, then we can say, well, you know what? I bet it is purple because SK has a 95% accuracy rate in colors. So you've got a
Oh.
track record that I can base my belief, the level of belief that I'm going to put into what you just told me. I can base it on based on your track record in the database.
So where is this database accessible by
Yes,
other people?
it's on my website. And it is available to anybody who wants to use it. It's on my website.
Okay. And
Um,
what is your
and
website?
I also have a free class on my website for people who say, I want to try this, but I don't really, want to spend money till I know what it is. I created a free class just for those people because I'm that way. I don't want to spend money on something till I know what it is.
Sure.
And so I created it's definitely not a sales pitch. It's just a class. It's a 4-part class. They sign up for it. They get they get an email that has a link to the first video, and the next day they get an email with a link to the second video, etc. If they have any problems getting the links or the links don't show up, they can email support at intuitivespecialist.com, send them the links directly. And so it's really great because it's a class. And when I created it, I have a business partner who's really good in all the areas I'm not. And he was like, Lori, you can't give this away. This is a real class. You could sell this. And I said, that's why I'm giving it away. People have to experience it for themselves. They
That
can't
makes
watch
sense.
somebody else do it. That's just like going to a magic show, right? That's cool. And
Yeah.
you leave and you're never thinking about it again. But if you do it yourself,
Yes.
you're not fooling yourself. Like you're being honest to yourself. So when you do it yourself, then the people sit there and go, "Oh my God, I can't believe I just did that."
I think it's so
So
wonderful, all the information you give for free on your website. So if you would share your website, and I'll also post it in the show notes.
yes, it's just HTTPS. That's how it is, right? HTTPS.
Yes.
HTTPS :// intuitive specialists with an S at the end of specialists.com.
Okay.
Intuitivespecialist.com. That's the website. And you'll see right there at the top of the page, it says, free masterclass or something, free introduction to remote viewing masterclass. You can sign up for it right there. And have them mention that they heard about it on your show.
Oh,
That
yeah.
would be really great. Yeah,
That would be cool. Yeah. Bright
then I'll
Pink
make sure.
Soul. Put that in there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
put that in there that you heard about this on SK's show. That would be
Right
great.
on.
Anyway, so that would be a wonderful thing because then people can actually experience it for themselves and without having to pay a penny for it.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
For sure. So
So
it's
what do you have coming up that we can look forward to tap into with
well
you?
in next week, October 21 through 23, I'm teaching my signature 3-day fast track basic controlled remote viewing workshop.
Okay.
This is a live workshop that I'm actually teaching in real time. I've been teaching this class since 2000, so I've been teaching it for
Wow.
25 years now. And it is the signature class that lays the foundation for everything else anybody would ever do in any field of remote viewing. It's absolutely fabulous. It takes that introductory class that's free and takes it to, a huge other level, going much deeper. So after you've taken the free class, if you go, oh my gosh, this is it for me, this is the thing I'm going to do. That's how I felt when I took my first remote viewing class. I was like, oh, this is it. This is the thing for me.
What
I knew it right
initially
away.
attracted you to it? I'm just curious.
Well, I was trying to find that reconciliation between my former belief system and the things that had happened to me all my life. And I had gotten hired to run this refugee program. And the first thing they did was send me to Denver to a conference on post-traumatic stress disorder. And there was a man speaking at the conference who just fascinated me. And they kept referring to him as Colonel so-and-so. And so that night, I thought, how weird. I just met my very first colonel 3 days ago, because I had started this job, and the day I started, this man showed up to my office, and he kind of looked like James Bond.
Sure.
It's like, this guy looks like a spy. And then I found out that he was indeed, he had been sent by the CIA, and he was a colonel. And they had just admitted the very first Kurdish people into the United States on the refugee program. And they sent them to my program, and it was my first day of work.
Oh,
And they
wow.
sent them there because nobody thinks of looking for high profile refugees in Amarillo, Texas. So anyway, they put him in charge of keeping an eye on the program, and keeping an eye on me and everybody who came in. And we actually became pretty good friends. He worked with me for 6 years. But anyway, this guy was a colonel. And so then I meet this other colonel. I didn't meet him, but I saw this other colonel speaking at the conference. And that night when I went to sleep, I had a dream in which I was talking to this guy at the conference and telling him that I had met this other colonel. So the next morning, it was a very nondescript dream. But the next morning, when I got to the conference, I got there early, and I'm waiting outside the ballroom doors for them to open the doors. And this guy shows up, and he's standing there. So the two of us are total strangers. We're standing outside these doors, and I looked at him and I said, "I had a dream about you last night." I laughed because my mom used to say, if you want a man to remember you, tell him you had a dream about him. And so I said, I had a dream about you. And he's like, oh, really? What did you dream? And I said, well, I dreamt that I was talking to you about this colonel that I just met in Amarillo, Texas. And he said, oh, what branch of the military is this guy in? And I said, I don't know, but I think he was in military intelligence. Because at that point, I still didn't know that he was with the CIA.
Okay.
I didn't.
Sure.
And so I said, but he had told me that he was retired and he was with military intelligence. So I said, I think he was military intelligence. And he goes, oh, I was in military intelligence. And right as he said that, the cover of a new book that had just come out that was on the new arrival shelf at the bookstore flashed in my mind. And I just blurted out, have you seen that new book? And he said, what new book? And he said, I don't remember the name of it, but it's turquoise and black on the cover, and it has something to do with psychics in the military. And he goes, are you talking about Psychic Warrior by David Morehouse? And I said, yes, that's the book. And he said, oh, you're asking me about that book because I am a main character in that book. I was the psychologist that was in charge of vetting everybody that went into the program for 20 years.
Oh my goodness.
And so then he starts like leaning into my space and, kind of making me uncomfortable. And he's like asking me questions like, are you artistic? Do you remember maps easily? Just starts shooting these questions at me. And I was kind of nodding and backing away. And then he said, and then he realized, I think, that he was freaking me out. He said, wait. He goes, wait, because I'm kind of like ready to bolt and run, right? And so he says, hey, when you get home, look up controlled remote viewing on the internet. And the internet was really new. I mean, because this was like 1996.
Okay,
the internet
sure.
was pretty new. So, but as soon as I got home, I looked up controlled remote viewing, and up popped Lyn Buchanan's website. And it was this big page, and it said in big letters, what is CRV? And then I read the page, and it was like I heard the eureka moment, just it was like, this is it. This is what you've been searching for your whole life.
Wow.
And it made me feel normal because I had just come into the realization that I was not normal compared to most people. I
Sure.
was reading a book. I was reading a book, a study that they had done on children who had had near-death experiences, and they did a controlled study where they had four groups. They had this one group that all had had near-death experiences, another group that had been very, very ill, another group that had perfectly healthy, and I don't remember what the fourth group was, but the long story short was they followed all these kids for 20 years, and they found that the ones who had near-death experiences had a much higher degree of psychic ability. And then they explained what normal was versus a high degree. And I went, oh my gosh, I'm not normal. Because you know what they
Right.
described as normal? Normal is having one verifiable psychic experience per lifetime.
Oh my
One.
goodness.
And so then I went, oh my God, I'm not normal. I must be a freak. And it was that day that I went to the conference and had the encounter with this guy. So when I read Lyn Buchanan's page about what is CRV, it made so much sense, and it basically was explaining everybody has psychic ability, but a lot of people just never access it or don't know how to access it. And this is a methodology for being able to access and develop your psychic ability and separate true psychic perceptions from random thoughts and to be able to control it.
Right.
And somebody wrote me and said, how do you control? Why would I want to control my psychic ability? And I said, well, why would you want to control your car?
Yes.
You don't want your car
Yes.
just crashing into stuff. You want to control it because otherwise it's just the tail wagging the dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want the tail wagging the dog. It's like anything else. If I don't take a class and learn how to play the piano, then I'm just going to make noise. So it's like anything. If I want to learn to play golf, I have to study and practice.
Sure.
And so I
How,
think
how long does
that's.
it take? How long would you say in general, does it take someone to feel confident in as a controlled remote viewer?
Well, here's the thing. It's so individualized and it depends so much on people's background. For example, me coming from a very religious background and being so afraid to displease God, I think it slowed me down quite a bit, that fear. I
Okay,
think I could have
sure.
developed much faster had I not been harnessed with
That
that.
makes sense.
And when I look at my students now, I've taught thousands of students now, and I've also worked with many of Lyn Buchanan's students, and I've also worked with Mel Riley, who was the first remote viewer put into the unit. I've also worked with some of many other people, many other teachers and students, and what I've observed is that there are people who come from religious backgrounds who kind of approach this with much greater trepidation, and then there are other people who come at it, just swinging, just ready to rock and roll. And I find that people who have a really good balance of left and right brain skills, for example, you have a business of working as a psychic medium. So you may have, I'm sure you have excellent right brain skills, or you wouldn't be able to do that. But then in addition, you have to do your taxes, you have to run your business.
Right.
So you probably developed your left brain skills as well. So you'd probably be really good at this because you probably have a good balance of left and right brain skills. So, as far as the length of time it takes, one of the things that I work really hard on with my students is sharing shortcuts with them in the sense of their mindset.
Okay.
Because had I had certain if I'd had more help with my mindset, or maybe I think it wasn't the help, I think it was just that I was unable to accept certain mindsets at that time. So I think if I had had a better mindset and been willing to give myself permission to make mistakes and give myself permission to make stuff up, then I would have progressed faster. And I still remember the moment in which I really turned a corner and started just exploding in my ability was when I realized, I really don't care whether I'm right or wrong on this practice target. I'm just going to have fun and let stuff flow and make stuff up and just see what happens. And that's when I started getting
That's
really
cool.
accurate and just really having a whole change in the way that everything is happening.
It reminds me of, we're going to wrap up here in a second. There's so many things I want to ask, but we are going to wrap up. However, it reminds me of a story that I heard Bryce Dallas Howard, the actress, talking
I
about.
can't hear anything except a little bit of
Oh, I'm
mumbling.
sorry. How about this? The actress. And she was
Oh,
talking
yes.
about how her, and you would just think, oh, she was brought up by Ron Howard, the director, so she's going to be a natural actress. but she was really influenced by her grandmother, who I don't remember if she was an actress or not. She might have been, but it was something along the line as her grandmother had given her this advice. Just go to every audition with, count them down and do 100. And no matter what happens, you just do your 100. And once you get to your 100th, you'll know better which, you'll feel more confident and you'll be an actress then. And in a sense, what you're saying is if you just have that attitude, like it doesn't matter what the results are, let's just do as many as we can and see what happens.
Yeah, it's so true. And if you practice, and a lot of times, the answer to many questions we get is practice, practice, practice. And Lyn used to joke, watch out, folks, he's going to use the P word.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, that's cool. That's a really good attitude. And I think, what would you say? Curiosity is that a good thing to have?
Curiosity is key. The difference between a good remote viewer and a world-class remote viewer is curiosity.
Interesting.
That is definitely it. But even though, and Lyn used to say that to me, but I have to admit that back then I would even think, how do I get curious? Like, what can I be curious about? Now I don't even quite, it just comes automatically. I'm like, oh, what is that pink thing?
Right.
Let's look at it, but back then I'd be like, I'd just be kind of brain dead, like, what? How do I be curious? But
Yeah.
It all comes to you eventually. But one of the things that I have to say is that it's so helpful to have a partner that you can remote view with. So I always encourage my students to pair up, and find a partner, which of course you can do if I have a club now in my company. It's so funny because everything that I have in my company came from me remembering how lonely my journey was and wanting my students to be able to to feel like they had their hand held, right?
Sure.
So not only do I have books out, I have 2 books out for those, and my name in Amazon is Lori, Lori Lambert, Lambert Williams, and so I have 2 books out. I'm working on the third. They're how-to books in remote viewing. Then one of them is called Boundless, Your How-To Guide to Practical Remote Viewing, and the other is called Monitoring, a guide for remote viewing and professional intuitive teams. So those are 2 books that I have out, and the Boundless 2 is coming out.
Oh, wow.
And my goal is to write a series of books because there's every kind of learner. There's learners who learn from reading, learners who learn from hearing, learners who learn from doing. So I try to create something that will meet every learner's needs. We have video courses. We have live 3-day workshops. I have a club for every level of my students so that they can come to our meetings every month and get mentoring,
nice.
One-on-one mentoring, because I really wanted that when I was going through it. I wanted somebody to hold my hand and help me. We even have a 3-year professional certification program for our students. So there's so much we have to help people in this journey so they're not alone.
Absolutely. And I will post those books in the show notes as well.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you so much for all of this amazing information. And I look forward to having you on again. You're always welcome. And we have so many more things to talk about, like the paranormal and the supernatural. And, I would really love to delve into that in a future recording if you're up for it.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, SK. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.
And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thanks for joining me on Bright Pink Soul today. I'm SK, and I would love to hear from you. If you'd like to share your questions, stories, or experiences, whether for the podcast or just personally, send me a message at skcawthron.com. That's all for now. Until next time, take good care.